Hello everyone, welcome back to Geek Warning from the Escape Collective. I'm James Huang. I'm joined today by Dave Rome and Ronan McLaughlin. Zach is off riding mountain bikes, I should say, in Moab, Utah, and Kaylee is spending the next few days in the car, presumably listening to a lot of podcasts. We have a lot of things to discuss today, including Primož Roglic's ill-timed chain drop on the individual time trial of the Giro d'Italia, Campagnolo's brand new super record wireless electronic road group set, some new spokes from DT Swiss, the return of Matt Wikstrom, and the upcoming Handmade Bicycle Show Australia. Welcome to the show, everybody. Dave, it's good to see you as always. Ronan, I feel like we haven't seen a whole bunch of you lately.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, at least on the podcast anyway.
Yeah, I was away. I think I just missed a couple of episodes, and then I was away racing for a week, and then I was, as we're about to hear, in Italy last week for the Campag product launch. So yeah, good to be back.
Dave, are you testing anything fun right now?
Nothing too new. Some fun things. Still riding that Epic World Cup. Still playing with that suspension setting on it. Yeah, and trying to wrap up a review of the classified hub system.
Oh, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Ronan might give me a hand on that one because he's also now spent some time on it. So
excellent.
I spent 5 days road racing with the classified hub, and a 60-tooth front chainring, which was fun.
Well, that is more. That's 5 days longer than I've spent racing it, or with a 62-tooth chainring fitted to it. So I think 60.
I couldn't go for 62. It's one of the things on my mind. I'm not sure I'm going to use it this week, but the ever-reducing chainring clearance that we have on modern bikes, it's often overlooked. But anyway, I digress a bit.
Yeah, cool. Nice. No, mine's fitted to a gravel bike at this time, so we'll perhaps have different takes on it.
Yeah, you don't, because you're saying that you don't have a 62 chainring on your gravel bike, huh? Weird.
I thought you were going to say because we don't have different takes in general, anyway.
Yeah, no, the 60-tooth chainring on the gravel bike didn't work out. Just kept running aground. Yeah.
You kept high centering on boulders when you were gravel riding, Dave.
Exactly.
All right. Well, before we get started, this episode of Geek Warning is brought to you by, you, the listeners, actually, because, and it's because of the generous support of our members that we're able to do all this. Monthly memberships at Escape Collective, we just kicked those off. Those start at just $11.99 US. And actually, you can save 30% if you go with an annual membership, which is what we have been offering since day one. If you want some more information on all of that, head to escapecollective.com/join. And yes, please consider becoming a member. Before we dive into the news, we've got a couple of things for this week's Corrections Corner. Dave, you and I had a little bit of a somewhat spicy conversation about Kask's new helmet, specifically one new feature, the Fluid Carbon 12 thing. We heard from Kask. They let us know quite kindly, I should say, given the conversation that we had, that the new thing is not called Fluid Carbon 12 Composite Technopolymer. It's just Fluid Carbon 12. So our apologies, Kask.
Yeah.
And Ronan, I think you still have that review coming, so we'll sit tight for that one. And then from a couple weeks ago, we were talking about Wheelsmith spoke prep and how that may or may not be able to be brought back to life. Dave, you heard from a couple of Escape Collective members who let us know that that stuff can apparently be brought back to life with just water, thankfully. Woohoo.
Yeah. The mechanics that let me know that, one of them also suggested that it might be a bit like paint, that at a certain point, once it's fully dried, then it's probably too late. But, once it's getting a little bit powdery and you can still sort of move it around like a slight wet chalk, then you can add some water and keep it going for longer. So there you go.
I wonder if you could actually, I'm going to launch on a tangent here since Kaylee's not here to do it. Have either of you ever seen those like sugar bear ceramic things that you put into brown sugar to keep them from caking up?
I have not.
No bakers in the bunch here. Well, there are these little ceramic, I mean, they come in a variety of shapes and whatever, but they're just these little ceramic things, and you soak them in water, and then you kind of just like wipe them off a little bit, and then you toss them in your bag of brown sugar to keep it from drying out and solidifying. And I wonder if you can do something like that with Wheelsmith spoke prep. Maybe take those two little plastic things and put them in with one of those ceramic sugar bear things and put them in a glass container or something, maybe? Just a thought. Anyway.
Sounds more complicated than adding a few drops of water.
It could be more, well, but it just keeps it from drying out in the first place, right? That's the point. Anyway. All right. Enough of that tangent. Dave, you also have another little bit of news that you wanted to add. Unfortunately, not some great news.
Yeah, it's had the passing of an interesting industry member, kind of someone who was quite pivotal in many ways. Bernard Roglič, he passed away at age 73. The engineer of the Roglič hub, that 14-speed, at least in its latest iteration, the 14-speed internal geared hub. But I guess what many people don't know about him is that he was actually quite important for some other big things in the bike industry. One being basically the modern bike chain. So, yeah, his first chain patent, which is sort of their first product that they started the company on, was actually adopted by Campagnolo as Campagnolo's 8-speed chain. They went out and sought the best bicycle chain, and they ended up finding this little German manufacturer, and that ended up to be Rohloff. So yeah, that chain design, I guess, did influence the modern chain that we know. And they've had other things like 1992, they had the first drop-in style chainwear checker. So yeah, thanks for everything you did, Bernard. And thanks to Adrian at Melody Wheels for letting us know about this.
That's always a bummer to hear about talent like that passing away. We'd like to extend our best wishes to his friends and family. And thanks for the contributions over the years. He'll certainly not be forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, moving on to some news. We have, the end of the Giro d'Italia was pretty interesting to say the least. We'll leave the racing discussion to a couple of other podcasts that we have here at the Escape Collective. But from a tech perspective, the penultimate stage was pretty interesting because this year's GC was decided on that penultimate stage. It was an uphill individual time trial covering about 18.5K with just over 1,000 meters of climbing. And sitting in second on GC was Primož Roglič of Jumbo-Visma, and he actually managed to leapfrog Geraint Thomas of Ineos Grenadiers by 40 seconds to land first in the GC after that stage, but it nearly ended in disaster. Ronan, what happened?
We've seen Roglic climbing, I think it was about 3 kilometers to go on that climb, and I don't know if it was like a drainage gully or something across the road, but he hit it at an awkward angle in sort of, he only had a single ring at the front, but in one of the larger sprockets at the rear, and sort of pedaling as high a cadence as you could, possibly expect on a climb that steep, and just whatever angle he hit it at, he happened to pop the chain off. Which, given how tight things were at that time, I think at that moment he was 16 seconds ahead of Geraint Thomas. There was 26 seconds between them on the GC going into that stage. I think many feared that could have been disaster for Roglic and his chances of winning the Giro, but he kept it sort of calm as he usually does. Got off, got the chain on, got a push by one of the only fan who happened to be standing at Cedar Road, who also happened to be, I think, some connection to a ski jumping career, either a former coach or teammate or something like that. The person who happened to be standing there at that moment in time, and off he went and won the Giro. Obviously then the reaction online was a mix between effing Wombai and SRAM haters, which I feel was a bit unfair because at least myself, I'm gonna put it down to just the unfortunate angle he happened to hit that gully at.
And just to back up a little bit, so Jumbo-Visma is sponsored by SRAM, and for that time trial, at that point in the time trial anyway, he was running a SRAM Red Explorer 1x12 group set, single chain ring up front. We did get confirmation that he was running a chain guide, a pretty minimal one, but he was running a chain guide nonetheless. I did reach out to SRAM to see if they had any comment on this, and let's see, what did they say here? They hold on. All we got from them, the official statement from SRAM was, quote, "We are incredibly excited to win the Giro d'Italia," unquote. So needless to say, there wasn't a whole lot of discussion there. But that all said, I think all three of us have ridden that group set or various iterations of SRAM's won by road group sets in the past. Dropped chains are not anything new to road racing, road cycling. I guess we're usually used to seeing it in 2x setups, however, usually when someone's shifting up front. And kind of more recently, we've seen some situations at high speed where the chain has kind of gotten kicked off the chain rings up front due to a rear free hub that had a little bit more drag, that sort of thing. But Roglič was, as you said, Ronan, he was pedaling at a pretty high cadence. He was not coasting at all. He did hit that sort of drainage gully. It didn't really seem to hit it that hard, and he didn't seem to be going that fast either. This is kind of a head scratcher for me because I don't really know how this could have come off. For whatever SRAM haters want to say about SRAM stuff, won by drivetrains, especially with modern narrow wide chain rings and with a pulley cage clutch, and particularly with any sort of chain watcher, those or chain guide, they're generally pretty secure. Do we have any ideas what happened here?
I have a thought, which is that gully probably caused him to adjust his cadence a little bit, or maybe even have a slightest micro kickback at the wrong time, which would have dislodged the chain, as it's bouncing at the bottom there. Because that chain catcher wasn't doing a lot. It was a pretty minimalist chain catcher, and it was really only on the top span of the chain. So if he managed to kick the chain off the bottom of the chain ring at the wrong time, then it can still pedal itself off. So and the clutches on those that orbit clutch are not super tight either. So if you go off road with that derailleur, you do still hear it bounce around a bit. So yeah, I think it's a lot of bad luck. I'm not going to blame SRAM here, but it's I think it probably could have maybe been prevented with perhaps a better chain catcher as well, something that actually surrounded the chain rather than just sat on top of the chain. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of speculation. The footage that I've seen of it's not very good. It doesn't give any real conclusive answers. So, Ronan?
Yeah, and I've been sort of back and forth on whether I'm going to say this or not, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I don't have anything to back this up, but I do think just looking at Roglic's style, he is, I don't know, does he run a saddle a bit high, or does he have a different way, a different pedaling technique or something? But with his style and the way he hit that gutter and the way that sort of shifted his weight in the saddle and as such onto the pedals, I was sort of, what we're going to say, jumping to the same conclusion there as you are, Dave, and that it was just, it was like I've used the same set, not the same ratios, but the same setup of SRAM won by for the bike that I built for Paris-Roubaix, and ridden that bike on the cobbles of Roubaix specifically because the chain retention is so good with those narrow wide chain rings, and so I think it was watching the replay over and over again, he just seems to hit that gully at the weirdest possible angle, which is understandable given that he's 40 minutes into a Giro d'Italia winning time trial and probably not really thinking or seeing all that straight at that moment in time, just concentrating getting the effort done. And I think had he had it any other way, or had it come earlier in the climb when he's a bit more maybe alert or whatever, it probably wouldn't have happened. And actually, just as I say that, am I right in thinking there was these drainage gullies multiple points up the climb? Sounds right in my head, but I could be making that up.
No, I think you're right. Because if I remember correctly, I feel like I remember seeing some of them that were actually covered, weren't there?
The Formula One was on at the same time, so I might not have been paying that much attention. But it was qualifying in Monaco, man. Come on. But yeah, I feel like there was more of these, and I also feel like having ridden one by a few times and having ridden a few wonky one by setups, I'm thinking of my everything setup there and throwing the chain a few times. I can just see how that happened. I don't think it would have mattered which system you were using. That chain was more than likely coming off. I think it kind of does though it probably, regardless of why it happened or how it happened, it probably poses a question for Jumbo-Visma and any other team if they want to go down this route in future, which for me at least I think is a bit sad. Apart from the money end of it, I do believe that Jumbo-Visma, part of their rationale for choosing SRAM is that SRAM are just much more open to setups like this. Like, you're never going to have seen Roglic using that same, was it 44 front and 44 rear? With
40 front, 44 rear.
40 front, 44 rear with you're now going to see him using one by with Shimano on the road, and same with Campag, and Jumbo-Visma being the sort of the way they are and the attention to detail they have now. That was what they said in the press release at the time, which obviously makes sense when they're announcing a new partnership. But I do believe they have proven since then, with Wout van Aert riding one by in a couple of races also, that actually is part of this new partnership that they have there.
Dave, this is maybe more of a question for you, since I know, Ronan, you're not a mountain biker, but I can't remember the last time. First, I can't remember the last time I rode multiple chain rings on a mountain bike. But the other thing is, I can't remember the last time I lost a chain up front on a mountain bike, either with or without a chain guide. Yeah. I certainly subject those. Yeah. Okay, but I certainly subject those bikes to a lot more bouncing around than I typically would on the road. Do we have any ideas as to why this still happens on the road and why it happens so infrequently off road?
I have no idea on that one. I mean, I'm thinking back, the last time I dropped a chain on a mountain bike was in like really terrible sand, like wet sandy conditions, where the whole group set just like bundled up with the sand until the point that the chain basically couldn't sit flat on the chainring, and it was basically the sand that was throwing the chain off. And that was on like a brand new, I'd say XX1 group set, so it's 11 speed that happened to me. I can't recall a time that I've since dropped a chain off a mountain bike one by since then. So it was like 6 or 7 years ago. So that's pretty good reliability when you think about it. So I mean, I don't know. If anything, the road bike should be more secure because you've got a bigger chainring, so there's more wrap on the chainring, and there's less external influence on that chain, right? Like, it's going through less forces. There's no suspension action working to throw it off the top. I don't know. It's just one of those things that I don't understand why we keep seeing this happen.
I mean, I'm sure if it was something that was easy to fix, then it would have been fixed by now. I do wonder if maybe it's like a chainstay length and chain line sort of thing, because chainstay lengths do tend to be longer for mountain bikes than they are on the road. So effectively, those chain lines can be a little bit more extreme, particularly at either end of the cassette. So that certainly could have something to do with it, perhaps.
I think so.
Either way, this situation still is a little bit of a head scratcher. If anyone out there has some theories, feel free to chime in.
I mean, the only other factors here are you're talking speed and cadence, right? So the cadence on road is often high when we're seeing these things. And the speed is obviously far greater. So perhaps there's maybe something there with like the free hub as well playing a role in once the chain starts to let go, the speed of the rear wheel is really sending that chain forward. But yeah, it's an interesting one. So it'd be good to get the perspective of someone designing this stuff on this one, because I'm sure they have answers.
To be a fly on the wall with Jumbo-Visma's mechanics.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like most of the chain drops we see on the road, though, are as a result of a front derailleur shift. Obviously that's not what happened here with Roglic, but just thinking of most times that I can recall seeing a chain drop, watching on TV or whatever, it doesn't seem to be as random as this. You can usually point to a front derailleur shift or something that has caused it.
Yeah.
This
one seemed just totally out of the blue.
Yeah, no, as far as one bike goes, I mean, we saw at World Champs, was it Belk? No, where am I imagining that we last saw a one by drop on the road?
I don't remember. I know we have seen
it. I mean, my
not
60th one by dropped about 100 times on the final stage of that race, but that's an entirely different story.
Oh,
we can maybe get into it. We maybe get into that another time. Like I'm still investigating.
Okay. All right. Well, either way, point being, for as advanced as drivetrains have come, they are still not entirely foolproof. And thankfully, Roglič didn't actually lose the Giro as a result of this. He still managed to pull it out. So I'm sure that was a huge relief for him, obviously, and the team.
And SRAM.
Certainly for SRAM, most definitely.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on from this one. Speaking of group sets, Campagnolo, as we mentioned earlier, they've got a new super record wireless electronic road group set. And Ronan, you said you were in Italy for the launch event for this thing. What are we looking at here? It's very inexpensive, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, they're really going for the volume play. I mean, it's about €5,200. So yeah,
Nice. What bike do you get with that?
Yeah, that's the interesting part. There's no bike nor power meter with that. But anyway, the new group set, it is Campagnolo's super record wireless 12-speed disc brake only new group set. It is entirely wireless. So the shifters and both derailleurs are there's no wires connecting them anywhere. The derailleurs, interestingly, have not only Campagnolo proprietary batteries, but they're actually independent from front and rear. So you cannot switch them between front derailleur and rear derailleur. They're two entirely different batteries there.
And that's the result of them hitting a patent owned by SRAM, right? That SRAM had the interchangeable battery.
That's kind of what we were told at the.
Right.
Well, it's not kind of what we were told. That is what we were told at the launch. I wonder if that was perhaps lost in translation a little bit, and that the SRAM's derailleur patents inhibited Campag from maybe having the same battery front and rear. I can't quite work. The only reason I'm thinking that is because I can't quite work out how you can patent having the same battery in two different things. It's like how then do we have AAA and AA batteries and. I can't quite work out how you would patent that, but I'm not a patent lawyer, so perhaps they have. But yeah, this new group set, I think apart from it being wireless, the other big thing is just the sort of the gear ratios there that Campag have gone with. Up front, they've got a 50-34 chainring combo, a 48-32, and a new 45-29. And then out back, they've got three new cassettes, all starting with a 10-tooth. The widest of which is a 10-29. So you've got actually 1-to-1 gear ratio there if you want with the 45-29 chainring and the 10-29 cassette. And then if you go the opposite direction, you go with the biggest chainring option. You've got a 50-34 and a 10-tooth sprocket. So I think, as I said in the sort of the feature that everyone's on it today, in old money, that's equivalent of like a 55-11 or whatever. So there is actually, and that's what Campag have really focused on here, is increasing the range within the cassettes and the chain rings, but without introducing huge jumps between sprockets. So what they focused on was increasing the number of sprockets that have just a 1-tooth jump between them. So if I remember right, there's 6 1-tooth jumps on the new 12-speed cassette. And then the next couple of sprockets are 2 teeth between each. And then finally, the largest sprockets have 3 teeth jumps. So they've really tried to keep those jumps as small as possible. But yeah, there's an entire deep dive on the new group set live on the website right now.
What hasn't changed?
Actually, yeah, you just reminded me of I was running around my brain there trying to think, there's one big thing, I can't remember what it is.
Buttons.
Yes, it's these new buttons. Well, it's the death of the thumb shifter, at least in terms of their electronic group sets. The Campagnolo thumb shifter is no more, and it is now replaced with the 2 independent buttons behind the brake lever on each shifter. One up, one down, stacked one above the other. Let's just say I'm sort of reserving final judgment on them until I've had more time to ride this group set a bit more. After my initial ride, which was granted just 40 kilometers, about an hour and a half or whatever, I definitely was not getting accustomed to this new shifter setup. Hitting the wrong button, making accidental shifts. I just found the buttons were a bit too close together, and being one above the other, it just wasn't as intuitive as any of the other systems on the market, and so it was definitely taking me a bit more time to get accustomed to it.
I mean, the levers or the button setup is very similar to what FSA does. I mean, the button operation itself, like the physical operation, is a little bit different. But as far as where they are, it's very similar. They're basically just a pair of buttons tucked in behind the brake lever. And as you mentioned in your article, Ronan, I mean, this is just a total sea change for Campagnolo in terms of their whole philosophy to controls, because they've always had this thing with, one lever, one function sort of thing. And one thing I thought was really interesting was when you mentioned how you have programmed your own EPS levers in the past. And you basically had set them up SRAM style, or with the one paddle behind the brake lever, doing an upshift in the rear, another one doing a downshift. And then the thumb levers, you used those to go up and down on the chain rings up front, which was actually pretty similar to how I program my my Shimano dual control levers. But the thing that is interesting is that, one thing I really did like about EPS was that you really could kind of just mindlessly just like paw at something, and you're going to find, like, as long as you find that button, you're going to find the right button because there was nothing else next to that button to hit. And now in this situation, it seems like you've got two buttons that do clearly different things. However, they are now quite next to each other, and it does seem like they're opening themselves up to confusion for one, but also I'm a little bit confused because you would think, is particularly given the cost, particularly given just sort of the market dominance of Shimano and SRAM at this point, that this group set is most likely going to appeal to kind of the Campagnolo aficionados already. And this feels like something that's going to alienate them. I mean, it kind of does for me. Like, I'm pretty shocked to see that thumb button is gone and just that whole method of operation is just gone.
Yep, 100%. Like the early adopters of this group set and the people that are the biggest customer group for this group set is already Campagnolo's customer that are already on probably a previous generation of EPS. They're the ones that are going to buy this first, and giving them a learning curve. Like Ronan's basically in this group, basically as a previous EPS user, giving them a learning curve and taking them away from a shifting preference that they probably already have just feels like a big misstep.
Yeah, it feels the same to me, to be honest now, and I can't help but feel they've had this unique identifying feature that they've brands around the world would probably tell you that you want to have this thing that people recognize you by, and they've just stripped that out of their new group set. And for me, at least, based on that first ride, the new system is a lot more difficult to sort of just naturally get a grasp of. I mentioned in the article, like, I regularly swap between group set manufacturers and mechanical and electronic and time trial and road setups, and you guys have mountain bikes as well, and we never really have, at least speaking for myself, it never takes me more than about 3.5 seconds to make the switch in my brain and just push the button that I need to push for whatever system that I'm on. And yeah, I just wasn't getting that by the end of this first ride. And I think you guys have hit the nail on the head there, and that's, it's a super record group set at €5,200. It's probably only going to appeal to current Campai customers anyway. What worries me more is that when it's eventually trickled down onto the new record or course or whatever comes next, there was some hints at the launch that there would be a lower spec wireless group set in the works. Whatever comes next, that is going to be what Campag sort of has to hang its hat on in terms of breaking into the market again. And yeah, I just don't feel that someone who maybe isn't a Campag customer at the moment or didn't like the thumb shifter, there's nothing there to win them over, really. Like, it's not that different enough to get those customers. And then for the Campag fans, or the Campag diehards as they usually are, yes, you've alienated those also. And I can't help but feel that it's the result of as we heard quite a lot throughout the presentation, and even from Valentino Campagnolo himself, and that the sheer number of patents that are out there now from the other manufacturers have restricted so much of what Campagnolo could do, and presumably SRAMs also restrict Shimano, and Shimano's restrict SRAM, and it's a vicious circle almost. But Campagnolo definitely mentioned it more than a few times last week, and I feel that this new shifter setup is Campagnolo reacting to what they've heard in the market, and that the thumb shifter is either love it or hate it, and they've tried to come up with something that will work better for all. And when they've made that decision to dump the thumb shifter, they've then probably run up against a few brick walls in terms of patent designs, and this is the best that they've been able to come up with without infringing on a patent. And to me, at some point, somebody should have just said, you know what, let's just stick with a thumb shifter.
It's funny. I mean, we were just talking about, sort of like all the SRAM haters out there and whatever. One thing I feel like people really can't criticize SRAM on is that whole ETAP method of shift actuation that they've had. It really is pretty brilliant, because whereas Shimano and Campagnolo, when they did their electronic stuff, they basically came out with electronic versions of the mechanical controls they already had. SRAM took the opportunity to rethink how shifters should be actuated in general, and just completely separated the functions between left and right, because they could now. And just to revisit this again, Ronan, like you said, the way that you program your own EPS shifters in the past with the paddles behind the brake lever and the thumb buttons, I can't help but wonder if it can't be a patent thing. Because if it were a patent thing, then you wouldn't even have the capability of programming the buttons to be that way. But it makes me wonder if companies like Shimano and Campagnolo don't adopt that method of shifter actuation purely out of just stubbornness, maybe. Because I mean, it works. I think it works better. I think a lot of people who have tried it, I think would agree that it works better. And to me, I feel like if they used that sort of setup with the kind of long-standing thumb shifter, the thumb button actuation that they also had, and the way that you have it programmed, Ronan, I feel like, yeah, I mean, that to me feels like that would be the best way to go. It just makes me wonder if they would just have more fans, if they would have more devotees, if they had gone that way.
I've always liked the thumb shifter. I have liked mechanical and EPS. I get along just fine with DI2. It's not my favorite. I find the buttons are a little close together, especially if you're wearing big gloves, you can hit the wrong one accidentally. But there is just no denying it.
What are big gloves for? What do they do? Why would you wear those?
If you're working in the garden and you happen to find yourself on a bicycle.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Must be an Irish thing.
Yeah. It's for when you're cutting turf. That's a joke from a different podcast. Anyway, the point I was going to make is that there is no denying that the Axis or the ETAP shifter design is just, by far and away the most intuitive. Anybody jumps on a bike, it's just intuitive. And this new, I think I mentioned in the article also, this new Campag setup, which is very like FSA's Wii system also, where you've got, upshifts and downshifts at the rear that are moving the derailleur left and right, and then you've got upshift and downshift buttons at the front that are stacked one above the other, and it's kind of like, as I said, trying to pat your head and rub your stomach at the same time. It just it wasn't going all that well when I was out on the bike, but yeah.
Like to move away from the shifter, like that's obviously the shifter's obviously got, I guess, the most newness in it, but the brakes are basically the same. Are they?
Brakes are basically the same.
Yeah.
There's a slight sort of aesthetical or architectural change to them in that they look different, and that's supposed to be some sort of minor aerodynamic tweak. But you actually, performance-wise, they're entirely the same as the old ones, which I think we'll all agree is probably a good thing.
And the crankset still Ultra Torque, still carbon, still a titanium spindle.
It is, yes.
Okay.
Still a Hearth joint, still reverse thread, bolt in the center and all that. But the BCD is now smaller to accommodate the smaller chain rings, and the Q factor is now wider for some reason that I was told.
Probably for
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Disc brake frames, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the chain is the same as well, but with a quick link now, right?
Yes, the chain is the same. So it's, obviously fully compatible with the existing 12-speed stuff, but there is now also a 12-speed quick link. So I think Campag first introduced quick link, or a C-link as they call it, with eCar a couple of years ago. And now they've made a 12-speed version, which I know you'll be happy to hear, Dave, for your waxing endeavors. I've definitely...
I was already a step ahead of them.
Past.
I was already using YBN and SRAM links with Campy chains.
You see, I was sort of what was I said earlier? Campag diehard. So I was like, you need to have the Campag chain, and you have to put the pin in from the opposite side and do all the pinning and all that. But I did request on a couple of occasions a Campag quick link. Don't think I even got a response, but that was before my days in media. So.
Did Campagnolo say anything about drivetrain friction? Because I know the three of us have delved into this subject quite a bit, and it's pretty well understood at this point that larger chain rings and sprockets, generally speaking, run with a little bit lower friction than smaller ones. And Campagnolo seems to be following in the footsteps of SRAM here, as far as going with 10. I feel like the studies on that whole thing they're not entirely clear cut all the time. SRAM certainly disputes a lot of them, but did Campagnolo have anything to say about any of this?
So I asked that question specifically. I put it to Campag that there will be those out there who say that there's a fairly significant increase in drivetrain drag from running these smaller sprockets and chain rings, especially the 10-tooth. And they sort of freely admitted that, for the likes of the example they give was your World Tour sprinter. In that scenario where an optimized and the most efficient setup possible is going to make that's what they need and will make a difference in that scenario. But for the vast majority of riders, as they put it, the benefit from having this closer range cassette and just the improved sort of rideability and feel from those smaller jumps between sprockets is, in their opinion, sort of outweighing that. So they sort of acknowledge that there may well be a drop off in efficiency in those smaller sprockets, but and I tend to agree with them, to be honest. If I'm thinking my time trial bike or my race bike or whatever, I'm sort of maximizing chain rings and sprocket sizes and oversized jockey wheels and the whole works to try and improve efficiency there. But if I'm, on my training bike or gravel bike or whatever, I just want something that's going to feel and ride and perhaps be a bit lighter also. So yeah, they did acknowledge it, but they also said they don't think it matters for the most of us.
I think that level of honesty on that is quite refreshing, to be honest. It's the fact that they acknowledge that there is a drop off there, rather than dispute it, I think is commendable. And I also agree with their reasoning there, is that it doesn't make a difference for the population that are actually buying this group set in reality. Anyway, it's good to hear them say that.
Yeah. The other thing they maybe sort of admitted to, without admitting to, was that you might not see all the pros that they sponsor riding this new group set. So that might have something to do with that also. Not quite sure, but I think for the vast majority of people who are actually purchasing this group set, they're probably not going to be racing it for obvious reasons. That you wouldn't want to crash on it is the obvious reason I'm thinking.
Yeah. When you say that they might not be racing on it, would they not be racing on the wireless aspect, or would they be using like the wireless derailleurs and shifter with old cranks and cassette?
Yeah. What does the compatibility look like?
So a bit of both, actually, from what it seems. It's like I sort of pressed them on, if I have 12-speed record at the moment, can I use my 3953 and 1132 cassette? And again, they were, to their credit, they were pretty upfront on it. You could see they were at pains to sort of admit that yes, it is compatible, it will work. The only thing they were like hardline that is not compatible is the new 1025 cassette will not work with the existing 12-speed EPS or mechanical. So I think it's something to do with the way the parallelogram moves, that it just wouldn't be in the right place to work with a 1025 cassette. But from what I took from what they were sort of hinting at with the pro teams, it was there may well be some of the pro riders who are running the new wireless group set with the previous generation cassette and chain rings. There may also be pros who are just riding the previous generation EPS 12-speed. So a bit of a mix.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, Ronan, can we expect a longer term review from you on this sometime soon? Because I'd imagine 40K is probably not enough to really get a full feel for this thing.
Yeah, we were promised a long term review group set, so hopefully that's on its way at some point soon. I think it would be. I mean, like coming away from that, I just felt like, how can I give a sort of a final conclusion on that group set? It's just absolutely impossible after 40 kilometers. And what ultimately ended up happening was that I didn't have the best of experiences on the new group set. Perhaps that will improve with time. Campag has that. I don't know if they've actually ever used a line, but the phrase certainly goes about that Campag doesn't wear out, it wears in. So if that still stands true, there could be an improvement there. I'm not sure if that does or not, but only time will tell. The other thing I wanted to bring up, there was actually there's a vicious rumor going around that a certain Dave Rome actually added a line to my article saying, in good news, there's no new tools required for this group set, which I don't believe Dave Rome would ever see that as good news.
Couldn't have been me. That doesn't sound like something I would write.
As I said, vicious rumor.
Yeah. But is it true?
It is true. There are no new tools required, which is very, very on Campagnolo, I thought.
Yeah.
Well,
to be fair,
good news for Dave.
They still require a large number of unique tools versus everything else out there. So it'll just let people catch up on the tools they should get.
Right, and Dave already has all those tools anyway, and this just gives him more room in the budget for other tools,
or more room to buy the same tools again.
Yeah,
but the bleed kit is exactly the same, and the chain tool is just the existing 12-speed chain tool.
Enduro bearings make, in my opinion, the best puller tool for the Ultra Torque bearings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Knipex, the best plier for removing the snap ring that holds on the drive side bearing. I'd like to give a shout out to Pedro's for the best value choice of chain breaker for that chain, the Pro. But yeah, Campagnolo's own chain breaker is the best if you simply just want the finest chain breaker for their chains. There you go. Tool shout outs.
All right. All right. Well, Ronan, I look forward to hearing your long-term perspective of all of that, if only just from one Campagnolo fan to another. So hopefully I'll get my hands on this thing someday somewhere, although I'd imagine for that kind of cost, it's not going to happen anytime soon, but fingers crossed, we'll see. All right, well, let's move on. Next up on the list, I mean, you probably don't usually think too much about spokes, but it's kind of a big deal when someone like DT Swiss comes out with something new. Dave, what do we have here from DT Swiss?
Yeah, they released a new off-road spoke. So for, I guess, mainly mountain bike wheels, you could use it for gravel as well. But it's basically a very high-end fluted aero spoke. So imagine a slightly thicker aero spoke with kind of like a ridge down it. And it's called the Revolite. And yeah, it's expensive. It's same price as the Aerolite spokes, which is like their top-tier aero profiled racing spoke. Weight-wise, it's within a couple of grams once you assemble it into a wheel set compared to the Aerolites or that thin round spoke, the Revolution spoke. But yeah, it's interesting. It's a bit, to be honest, it's a bit vague over what the benefit of this spoke is, but it seems like it has the stiffness and the low weight of the Aerolite, but with the potential better impact resistance and perhaps better, I guess, cyclical durability of a round spoke. So yeah, it's kind of DT Swiss's aim to combine the best of both worlds of round and aero spokes into a product that has the stiffness and weight for off-road purposes.
I kind of wonder if this is DT Swiss trying to claw back some OEM spec, because it used to be really not that long ago that DT Swiss, people use their spokes on everything. But we've now been seeing so many other companies, like Sapim, I think, was the first non-DT Swiss big player to come on the scene.
Yep.
For OEM, and they took over a lot of OEM spec. And then now we've been seeing Pillar.
Yes.
I think it's a Taiwanese brand. A lot of people have been using their spokes, seemingly to very good effect. Yeah, Dave, I'm kind of with you on this one. Like when I read the press release for this and kind of looked into the spoke itself a little bit, yeah, I mean, they're saying it's a little bit stronger, fine, light, sure, okay. But yeah, I'm not, and it's just not entirely clear how this is a stronger spoke than the Aerolite.
Yeah, so for me, the Aerolite's always been like, for at least a decade now, it's been my go-to spoke when budget allows, and it's always proven to be incredibly durable. But when I have seen them break, it's often from impact. So it's often there's been a stick or there's been a rock involved, which you commonly then see the spoke break like within the middle of the spoke, which is a pretty weird spot for a spoke to break. So yeah, I think that's kind of what this is trying to solve for, is perhaps bring a little bit more material and reinforcement to that center of the spoke that perhaps can ward off those breakages, however rare they are. But yeah, I don't know. There must be enough market demand for this, the fact that they've gone to the trouble of making it, because they these are cold forged, so they'd be having to produce new dies and perhaps new manufacturing techniques in order to make them. So it's obviously no small investment that these spokes now exist.
Well, I do have a set of mountain bike wheels that I need to build sometime in the near future, so maybe I'll reach out to DT Swiss and see what I can find out. Because as it turns out, one of the guys in my usual Tuesday night riding crew, he often brings his dog, and we have nicknamed his dog Spokes, because his dog loves to carry sticks, loves to retrieve sticks, and somehow has an absolutely uncanny ability to take those sticks and just jam them right into your spokes. It is uncanny.
That is one vindictive dog.
So we will find out if it passes the dog test. We'll see.
Related but not funny story. I've seen a lot of those DT Swiss Aerolite spokes broke last week. You mentioned impacts. A teammate of mine was impacted by a team car in the Ross, and his rear wheel. It was like a side impact. He was out of the race, but he had no on a suspected concussion, no broken bones or injuries that way, which I think made it even more difficult for him. But the point I was going to get to is that it was sort of the first time that I had seen DT Swiss spokes broke in that way, and there was about 10 of the rear spokes that was the only damage done to the bike also. So it was, as bad as it was incredibly lucky it turned out so well also. But yeah, impact to the spokes, and they snapped right, all of them almost in the same place around the middle of the spoke.
Interesting. Well, Dave, I suspect you may see some of these spokes coming up soon on some custom wheel builds, because you are heading soon to the Handmade Bicycle Show Australia. How soon is that coming up?
What a segue. 3 days I'm on a plane. Well, Wednesday here, so I leave Friday morning. So I'll have breakfast with the whole Melbourne-based Escape Collective crew, a growing crew as well, with the likes of Jared and Jace joining us recently. Then onto the show. So yeah, it's it is my favorite show to cover every year. It always sparks my passion for events and for the world of cycling, if the passion's ever wavering. So it's a very cool facility. It's a very great show, and it's hard not to get excited when you see the continual innovation and sort of drive forward from a small group of Aussies. They've been pretty pivotal for a lot of technological developments in recent years.
Well, I, for one, always look forward to your galleries from that event. They're always really, really good. where was I going with this? Yeah, well, I, for one, am looking forward to your content from that because the galleries are always fantastic. Wish I could join you there. One day, maybe I will. You, thankfully, are going to be joining me for the Made show up in Portland, Oregon. So that'll be nice to have two of us over there. But speaking of custom bikes, we just recently published a new comprehensive guide to buying your first custom bike. It's full of super useful information that you should go check out now on escapecollective.com. However, keen-eyed readers might also note that the article was written by a familiar name, that of Matt Wikstrom. Matt was the original tech editor at the old place. And after taking a break from writing for a couple of years, we just want to extend to him a very warm welcome back. We're looking forward to seeing more from him in the weeks and months ahead. So good to have you back, Matt. And it looks like we are all going to have to step up our photography game yet again because the master of bike photography is back. So yeah, welcome back, Matt. Welcome back, Matt Wikstrom. Yeah, welcome back, Matt Wikstrom.
Yeah, I would say Matt is working at an unfair advantage, being based right near Hillary's in Western Australia, which is renowned for its sunsets, like internationally renowned for its sunsets. It's it's hard to beat that sort of light for general landscape photography, and he just so happens to put a bike in front of his landscape shot. So
yeah, indeed,
a little jealous, but we can't win them all, and the benefit is that him being in Perth, he still is just getting onto color TV. So that's that's the trade-off.
Well, yeah, and it does take us a while to get some of his submissions every now and then because he does have to send off his film to get developed. So
yeah,
takes us a little while.
Switch off the fax machine and all that. So it's no. Anyway, good to have you back, Matt.
All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap up the news. Let's since we have the three of us here on the show today, which is seemingly a rare occurrence, I'm kind of curious what's on everyone's mind. Dave, want to start with you?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit sore today. Got quite a grazed back and a few bruises. Turns out gravel shoes are not, specifically Shimano's gravel shoes, because that's what I was wearing at the time, the RX 801s, not the most secure of tread. I had a slightly comical, almost like banana slip style moment yesterday as I was climbing down from a rock shelf at the top of the rock shelf, and both of my heels left me, and I ended up sliding down quite viciously down this rock shelf, and that hurt, and it was a good reminder that not all shoe tread are created equal, and that some gravel shoes are not actually made for walking.
I have those same shoes right now. Those have been kind of my go-to partially for the last few weeks as I'm testing those as well. So we'll have a review of that pretty soon. But I have to say the tread on those shoes have kind of reminded me of CDs in the sense that like the tread seems to be there mainly to provide support of the shoe on the pedal, as opposed to being widely spaced to provide a good foundation for your foot when you're walking. So as far as I'm concerned, that's really the only major miss on those shoes. But in any event, you kind of gave that nice visual image of kind of like both your heels sliding out from underneath you. I guarantee you that was not as good of a visual image of me riding mountain bikes with some buddies up in Winter Park, Colorado yesterday. We ran into one section that was still going through a whole bunch of snow melt, and there were a bunch of pretty deep puddles, like almost lakes, I would say, kind of going through this dirt road that we were kind of traversing across. And as I was going through one of them, my front wheel caught a root that was underneath the water that I could not see, and I basically ended up on my back in the water. And a friend of mine thankfully did get a photo, and I was very, very wet, and I guarantee you that the water was very cold.
Does sound cold.
Not an ideal situation. That I cannot fault any shoe for that one. That was purely me.
I'm blaming the shoe, and I'm sticking to it.
All right, Ronan, what do you got?
I mean, I feel like I kind of have to share the story of my crash last week now also. Please do. But, I just came down in a mass pileup at 50 odd kilometers per hour with 3.5 kilometers to go on stage 3. But there was definitely a moment or a second midair where I was like, well, we're about to find out how brittle my bones really are. Turns out not all that brittle. I'm fine. But what I actually wanted to talk about, or what actually is on my mind this weekend, I'm not sure if I want to talk about it or not, is just that last week was my first experience of sort of, big peloton racing, everybody on disc brakes. And I'm not sure I really enjoyed it all that much. Turns out giving people braking power is maybe not all that good an idea. There was certainly a few crashes that were the direct result of people just being able to lock up much more violently than they maybe could have done in the past. One incident, the dog ran out, and there was sort of panic in the peloton, and the guy who crashed literally locked up his front wheel and went over the handlebars. And that happened. I've seen that happen on a few occasions. Also seen, countless people locking up their rear wheel, and I just don't remember that happening that often the last time I was in a big peloton like that. So, I don't know if my mentions are going to just go berserk for the next week off the back of that, but it was definitely something I noticed last week that I don't recall from racing previously.
What for the people unaware of what you raced, what was the race and what sort of level is it?
It was the Ross, which is it's a 5-day sort of Tour of Ireland, and it was previously a UCI 2.2. Then it disappeared for a while with COVID. Came back last year as a 5-day sort of international elite, but no longer a UCI race. So it's probably just that one rung below UCI 2.2. There was 175 riders in the bunch, I think, and there was a good 10 teams came in from abroad and 25 home-based teams. So it was pretty high level. There was I think the first 3 stages in a row we averaged something like 48.5, 49k an hour. So it was full on.
And do you think the people putting flat spots on their Vittoria Pro tires are perhaps spending too much time on Zwift, or is it really the disc brakes fault?
No, a couple of riders who I've seen locking up, they're not bad bike riders. They're good bike riders, and regardless of how good you are, if you're in a peloton, you can crash. It happens to the best riders. So, it was just as much of a disc brake convert as I am. It was just last week I went, actually maybe it was better when we had wet carbon rims and nobody could brake. Which I'm joking, obviously. That was not better, but yeah.
I mean, I can see what you mean, Ronan, because when you have a large group of riders in a situation like that, all closely packed in, it does make sense that, just how you wouldn't want someone suddenly turning left and right inside the peloton, you wouldn't necessarily want someone who is able to very, very quickly decelerate or accelerate, I guess. You just generally wouldn't want a huge change in velocity, so either speed or direction. And yeah, I guess disc brakes does provide that now, for better or worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's certainly, as I was navigating the bunch, which is probably the only thing that I miss from road racing more often, is just the sort of buzz of being in a big peloton like that, and so closely packed together, traveling at speed, moving through the bunch. And I was certainly more conscious of riders coming backwards quicker than I ever was previously. So I don't think it changed how I rode the bunch, but it's certainly something that I was aware of that I'd never thought of previously. But here, maybe I'm just getting old.
You're basically saying that the distance to braking is so much less than the person's reaction time behind that rider is kind of the difference here. You used to have a greater reaction time of seeing that person slowing down and perhaps not successfully slowing down with rim brakes on carbon wheels.
I don't even know if you see it. You just sense it, or you're aware that a slowdown is about to happen. Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's an argument. Had it rained last week, maybe
Yeah.
I would have heard it coming and it would have been better. But we had dry conditions all by the last day.
Yeah. Good thought.
Well, what I've got in my mind is thankfully not related to crashing at all. It's with seat tube angles, actually, because in particular with full suspension mountain bikes, we see a lot more kind of unusual frame designs, particularly ones that have non-straight seat tubes. And also this is something that we see a lot more in gravel bikes as well. So if you look at a geometry chart, you will generally see a reported seat tube angle, but that's usually a kind of virtual seat tube angle. And just one thing to keep in mind, if you are shopping for a new bike, you're trying to figure out what size you need or whatever, those seat tube angles, again, they are virtual, but they are measured with the saddle at a particular height. And I think it's important to keep in mind that if your particular saddle height is not exactly average, then that can certainly affect that effective seat tube angle. And for that reason, and maybe even that reason alone, I think it's still important that people, when you are out shopping for a mountain bike or any bike that has a non-straight seat tube angle that kind of goes straight through the center of the bottom bracket like it had traditionally, still important to try and get a test ride on that thing if possible, because that saddle may be further forward or further back than you want it to be, or it may actually be in a good spot that you want that you didn't think you could achieve based on the reported seat tube angle. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. And like the way stack and reach figures are often used as a consistent measurement to compare against bike sizes. The reach doesn't count for seat tube angle, so that is, as James says, a common area to get misguided by just simply looking at that reach and stack figures.
Indeed. So that's all I had on that. But so let's go ahead. We're just about done with time here. Anyone got a public service announcement that they'd like to share? Oh, Ronan's got a finger up very eagerly. He's got something hot.
I want to sort of interrupt your weekly reminder to check your headsets with a different.
Oh, that's right. It has been a week since we've mentioned the Ring of Death.
Yeah, maybe if you want to take a second just to remind folks to check their headsets. I want to just give a mention to a topic that we wouldn't typically cover on this podcast, but I do believe it is relevant. Nutrition, and specifically,
I was about to
SAS.
joke protein powder, and then you actually anyway. Okay,
yeah, not protein powder, but
Okay.
SAS new nootropics gels, which they've got their Beta Fuel branding on the front of the gels, and Beta Fuel, for anybody that doesn't know, it is like it was first developed as a carbohydrate energy drink, had 80 grams of carbs per bottle, was kind of the first to push that limit. And then SAS branched out into beta bars and beta gels. And now they brought out these new Beta Fuel nootropics gels. Now, maybe I'm a bit slow or something, I'm not sure, but I didn't know what nootropics were. Apparently, they're like a study drug or something. Not illegal, but they're like students will use them to stay awake and stay more alert for longer while they're studying. So that's part of the thinking behind this new gel, in that this nootropics ingredient or whatever it is supposed to improve your decision making and heighten your awareness while you're in the peloton or whatever. Now, what it does say in the front of these gel wrappers is that it has 40 grams of carbohydrates, and there is no other mention of, apart from Beta Fuel, SAS, nootropics, and 40 grams of carbs per serving, there's no mention of what else is in it. So I went down to the local bike shop about a week before the Ross and bought a lot of these gels. I mean, maybe 50. I bought a lot. I'm a big believer in fueling the engine, and under the assumption that these were carbohydrate gels, because the last Beta Fuel gels I had were just carbohydrate gels. So got to the Ross, went through stage 1, took 5 of these gels on stage 1, felt pretty good, raced pretty well, finished in the bunch, whatever. Started stage 2, again, took 5 during stage 2, and within about 10 minutes of finishing stage 2, I took pretty violently ill. I mean, like, I was pretty sure I was out of the race. I was stuck to the bed. I was not getting up other than to be sick. And I didn't quite understand what had happened. I was pretty sure something had sprayed off the road and into my mouth and made me sick that way. But it was only the next morning when I had come round, recovered, had managed to eat dinner, was fine again. And I happened to be watching a video on time trial nutrition, and they mentioned these new nootropic gels from SIS that include 200 milligrams of caffeine, which I wasn't aware of. And long story short, it seems that my illness was actually an overdose on caffeine, because not realizing that each of these gels had 200 milligrams of caffeine in them, I had taken 5 2 days in a row, which is 1,000 milligrams of caffeine. But funny story, I had 2 other gels that had 75 milligrams of caffeine, so less than half the caffeine content that I had been saving for the end of the stages as my caffeine gels. So I had those 2. Again, long story short, I had somewhere in the region of 1,300 milligrams of caffeine between breakfast, pre-stage, and during the stage, 2 days in a row. And
it sounds like an admission of doping, Ronan.
At one point, this would have been doping because the limit was well below 1,200 milligrams. So I had around 1,300 milligrams of caffeine per day, 2 days in a row. Turns out not even the safe, but like the threshold for inducing seizures and that is around 1,200 milligrams, I believe. So that really, really scared me. And then when I started reading the small print on the back of these gel wrappers, that's where it says, it's the very last part of the nutritional information. It says 200 milligrams of caffeine per gel. And it also says in tiny small print, do not consume more than 1 of these gels per day.
Oh my goodness.
So I've never known a gel to come with a warning like that. I also have to question why it's so small on the back of the wrapper rather than being like big, bold. I also kind of feel like if they put it on big, bold print at the front, nootropics, 200 milligrams of caffeine, do not take more than 1 per day. Like that surely is going to make them sell even better. You're going to take 1 for every, there will be writers like that who will want that specific gel because you can only have 1 of them. They're so potent, you can only have 1. So I feel like they're missing a bit of a marketing trick, but more seriously, I think there should be a better warning there that these are not just carbohydrate gels.
I'm happy to hear you made it through and didn't find a somewhat humorous way to kill yourself. But
I kind of wonder what would have happened if you kept on that nutrition schedule for the whole race.
I'm not sure I'd be sitting here having this conversation.
Yeah, that's not quite where I thought you were going with that, which is I was in a bike shop about this was, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago now, working in a shop, and we had a guy who was doing his first 100-kilometer mountain bike race and wanted some sports nutrition. So we're like, oh, here you go. We sold him some electrolyte based mix for his water, and we're like, oh, just it doesn't have a large amount of flavor, so just follow the instructions is what we told him. It was Endura, which I think is an Australian brand, but it's known to be very high on magnesium. Anyway, he apparently did the race.
I see where you're going on with this one.
Apparently did the race. Came in to tell us a week later that he actually ended up having to go to hospital to be on a drip because his stomach was so bad that he ended up being so heavily dehydrated that it was a hospital trip to stop this from happening. And turns out that he was expecting to taste somewhat like Gatorade. So although the instructions were there, he decided to keep adding it until it was sweet like Gatorade. And he used the entire tub over 3 liters and consumed the entire tub of it in the space of 6 or so hours. So that's where I thought you were going with that PSA, which is to read the read the instructions and don't overdose on magnesium.
That is magnesium, no, but read the instructions. Yes, that is where I was going with that PSA, and that the fine print might be on the back of your gels. The last place you'd expect to find small print, but turns out quite important.
All right, well,
Good one.
I don't have anything to top that one, so I'm going to go ahead and call it right there. As always, thanks for listening to this week's show. If you liked what you heard, if you found us entertaining or informative, please go ahead and head over to iTunes to leave us a rating and review. As I've mentioned before, it really does help us out quite a bit. Maybe you have or have not noticed, we don't have any ads on the show aside from trying to get more people to sign up for memberships. But this is it. This is all we got. So no ads in the show. So you are our support here. So thank you again for all of you who have signed up. And definitely please go leave a rating and review. If you haven't become a member of the Escape Collective, please, again, as I said, head over to escapecollective.com/join and see if any of those options work out for you. Otherwise, that's all we got for this week. I'm going to try and get those mental images out of my head of being basically poisoned by magnesium and caffeine. So we'll see you next week.
Cheers.